Hey, what's up YouTube? And yes, you read this video title right. The Mandalorian Season 3 is perfect. And now, as you can imagine, that uploading a video of such title on such a day as this might lead one to believe that I am, as the kids say, capping. And indeed I am. Season 3 has a few problems, and I just wanted to talk about that because there's a few things I think really could have been avoided if they just made one change at the very beginning of all this. I think it could have made a lot more sense, and I think the longer they wait to do this, the less and less sense it will make in the future for future series. So let's talk about, first of all, I guess to start off, the thing with Season 3 is that the first episode was not really a banger. The first episode was not really rewatchable. It's definitely there to set up the rest of the season. The presumed focus of this season going into it, and the only real way it could focus on anything is Mando learning to use the Darksaber and regaining his status as a Mandalorian by taking a dip in the living waters of Mandalore. However, Mandalore is cursed. He cannot get to it, supposedly, but he will do his best to get it because this is important to him. Now, a venture like this is so obviously supposed to be the setup for the entire season. That will be the conflict, getting it. It's eight episodes in a season. You're probably gonna get to it by no sooner than the 5th episode or the 6th episode, and then you'll have a few more episodes after the fact of dealing with the aftermath of this. This goes a different route, and after the first episode setting up different conflicts and stuff, we have Mando bathing in the living waters on episode 2, which, mission accomplished. Very fast, but mission accomplished. It's kind of strange that it just suddenly resolved the situation so quickly, but okay. Surely we will focus then on Mando learning how to use the Darksaber and uniting all Mandalorians under his leadership. But that's also not really happening. Episode 2 brings in Bo-Katan. She appeared in episode 1, but she really gets involved in episode 2. And she's shown using the Darksaber much better, which makes sense because she's used it before. She knows how to wield it without it feeling so heavy, unlike Mando. So that happens. Episode 3 comes into play, and now we're looking at returning to the Mandalorian pack, so to speak. There's also the whole episode kind of derails from that story and talks about what's going on in the New Republic on Coruscant with Dr. Pershing, which was a great episode. I think it was a really good episode. It's just, it's not really the Mandalorian, you know what I mean? It's kind of doing a Boba Fett thing where it's taking a hiatus from the Mandalorian story and actually going to the New Republic. Okay, interesting. Keep that in mind for later. Then episode 4, we're talking about Bo-Katan potentially getting, now she's in the cult, like she called it before, of Mandalorians. And at this point, she's debating on taking off her helmet or not. Paz Rizzla's kid is abducted by this giant creature. This planet must be the remnants of Florida or Australia, perhaps combined. And we've seen a giant crocodile thing and a giant dragon. This is not a good place to live, right? This is not a good place to live. It's less likely for people to come here, to be fair. Decent world building, I guess, but not a good place to live. Which does come up later, but to refocus, Bo-Katan leads that mission to retrieve the kid from the dragon. And she does it. Mando also is doing, really cool stuff here. It's a good share of screen time between him and Bo-Katan. And she talks to the armorer about, having the mythosaur. So she gets the mythosaur on her armor piece on her shoulder pad, which flies off. For some reason, it doesn't look like it gets hit, but anyway, it flies off. And now she's got this new shoulder pad with the mythosaur on it. And at this point, we move on to episode 5. And what do you know? Episode 5 has Bo-Katan doing the leading, and Mando just kind of, doing what she says, and not really taking charge as much. Sure, he talks to the group as he's convincing the rest of the Mandalorians to help Greef Karga on Navarro because they're being invaded by pirates. And it's a good scene. He sits down, and then Paz Rizzla, backs him up. And I have all kinds of thoughts about that. But anyway, so far, that catches us up to speed at this point. Now, there's one last thing that I want to talk about in episode 5, but I have to wait until I finish with this first point, is that this season is not really about Mando. This season is not about him at all. It's about, first of all, Bo-Katan, and it's about the New Republic. It's not about him at all, which, to be fair, the name The Mandalorian technically allows the show to be vague with it. It could be any Mandalorian that it focuses on. It's just when you say The Mandalorian, we think of Din Djarin. So it's kind of strange to see that after all this, all this time, 2 years waiting for season 3 to come, that it's just not about Din Djarin at all. He has his first 2 episodes, and then after that, he's just not the main character anymore. Bo-Katan, by all means, is the main character. And I have no problem with Bo-Katan sharing a spotlight. I think having both of them share a protagonist role can be interesting. I just think it's being just overdone on her part. I think she is the much more interesting and focused character in the show so far. Now that could change, but even if it does change, it doesn't change the fact that I feel this way over halfway through the season already. A lot of people are saying this season does not have a vision, and I agree with that. Not entirely, but I do agree with it. I think the focus is on Mandalore itself and trying to reunite the people of Mandalore to, be together and not fight each other and reunite on their planet. And I think that's a cool idea. I and pretty much everyone else watching expected it to be Mando doing the reuniting, since he has Darksaber. And let's talk about my next point, which is inconsistencies. According to Bo-Katan and even the armorer herself, both of them have said that people will not follow if you don't have the Darksaber, or if you don't have the Darksaber by true means. Like, you didn't win it in combat, it was just given to you, people aren't going to follow you. So for instance, Bo-Katan's people under her, she had like 2 other Mandalorians. They just ditched her. They took the ship that they stole and ditched her. Off screen, mind you. Which is fine. That's not that big of a deal, but it just happens off screen. It's kind of weird. And then you have, the other inconsistency that I have a huge problem with is this entire series for, at this point, 21 episodes. The armor has insisted that no Mandalorian can ever take off their helmet. No matter what, if you take off your helmet in front of someone else, you are no longer a Mandalorian, and you had to bathe in the living waters. She gave what is essentially an impossible challenge to Mando, one of the most loyal people from their tribe, so to speak, from their clan. gave him an impossible task and said, no, you're no longer a Mandalorian, get out. But then Bo-Katan comes around, and just because she says you have seen the mythosaur, you can take off your helmet. And I don't think that makes sense. This is a character that has been adamant about her, I'll call it a religion, of never removing your helmet from the very beginning. And now all of a sudden, she's like, nah, you can remove it. You are the uniter. You are the one, you have lived both worlds, and you will unite everyone together. Now, I hate to say it. I hate to say it, but Bo-Katan has failed to unite Mandalore twice. Twice. In a span of 25 years, she has failed twice. And at some point, right? At some point, you kind of don't want to trust someone who has messed up this badly. And I question why this logically would make sense to the armorer. Now, from a storytelling perspective, yeah, redemption is cool. And I like that. And I think it makes sense for Bo-Katan to be redeemed. But really, it doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense from the armorer's perspective, because this contradicts everything she's ever said. This is the way. The way. There is not implied to be multiple ways by the armor. There is only one way, and it's the way. This is why everyone says it. Everyone in her clan says the same thing. This is the way, and they all repeat it. And it's not, this is not the way, this is a way, because she's said that, okay, Bo-Katan can just do this. Now there's multiple ways to be a true Mandalorian, right? That doesn't make sense. There's a lot of inconsistencies with that. And I thought, you know, Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau working on this, I really expected this to be more consistent. I expected the lore to match with what they had previously set up, but they're contradicting it. They're really just not telling a cohesive story with that. And that's a shame. Now, the other thing I want to talk about as far as a critique is that this is not as exciting as it could be. I have said this from like the end of season 2 that the story was done. Really, honestly, Mando's story was just done. You could have him be a side character in other shows and like have him pop up from time to time. That would be cool. But I mean, it's just what. Hear me out, okay? This is what I've said I've wanted to see from the end of season 2. If they were going to make a season 3, I want to see this. I wanted to see a 4-way death battle for the Darksaber. I wanted to see Mando and Grogu on the run while trying to restore his Mandalorian status. I want to see him on the run from Bo-Katan, from Moff Gideon, and from Paz Rizzla. I wanted this to be a 4-way chase the entire season for Mando to fight off and defend the Darksaber. This is what I wanted. Looking at this is what I really, really wanted. Can you just imagine? Can you imagine like the different fighting styles, the different tactical things, the different tactical ways that these characters bring? Mando is just kind of on his own, but he's got a force-sensitive ally in Grogu, so that's pretty good. He also has pretty good connections across the galaxy. So it's overall, it's a, you know, he's the, obviously as far as numbers go, he would be the weakest link here. And then you have Bo-Katan. Bo-Katan has fought wars, many wars, and she's got a few Mandalorians on her side. She's got an Empire ship at this point, and she's got her palace. So, you know, at this point you're like, okay, she definitely has the experience to be a huge threat to Mando. she can chase him down the easiest. And as far as going toe to toe in combat, she's a lot more nimble. She's more experienced with her gadgets and everything like that. And having her backup as well that are loyal to her, even though she lost a Darksaber, that meant something, right? That seemed like true loyalty at that point. And then you've got freaking Paz Rizzla, the absolute unit of a man, the Titan of a Mandalorian. This guy has infinite weapons. Just imagine him going after not only Mando, not only Din, but freaking Bo-Katan and Moff Gideon, and he's just like, they keep shooting him, but he keeps getting back up because he's a tank and he can just tank anything. And every time they destroy or disarm his weapons, he pulls out a bigger one from somewhere. Like, this guy is just an unstoppable army of one, and that would be his thing. I would like to see him have his own, like, insanely dripped out ship with tons of cannons and stuff like that. Like, that would be his thing. The other two that I've mentioned so far think whenever they're going into battle. Paz Rizzla does not think. He just shoots at whatever is moving, and he's got the gunpowder to do it. All right. And of course, he doesn't like Mando because he lost to him before, and he's no longer worthy. So he's like, you have betrayed your kind. You're not loyal to the armor. You're not loyal to the way. I'm gonna kill you and take the Darksaber for myself. And then, last but not least, Moff Gideon, with the force of whatever is left of the Empire starting to form into the First Order at this point. He's got he's got armies essentially. He's got small armies. He's got money. He's got ways to do things. And why would he want the Darksaber here? Because the Mandalorians, following him, being the great warriors that they are, would be excellent in fighting the New Republic until the First Order can truly come together. It really makes sense when you think about why he would want the Darksaber in the first place. And at the very least, even if the Mandalorians don't follow him, they're not organized under one leader who rightfully has the Darksaber. So he benefits by having that anyway. So you've got these 4 different factions. You've got Mando and Grogu out on their own, you know, just trying to be redeemed. And every episode, as they're getting a step closer to getting to the living waters, there's another threat coming at them. Maybe the first episode, it's Bo-Katan. The second episode, Paz Rizzla comes gunning for him, and I mean literally gunning for him. The next episode, you got Moff Gideon appearing, and he's got his armies and stuff. And at this point, Mando can't defeat an entire army. At this point, Bo-Katan shows up, and she's like, "Oh, you're the enemy of my enemy. So technically, right now, my enemy is my friend, and I'm gonna kill Moff Gideon." and so she's going after him and everything. Din manages to escape with another step closer to the living waters. Another episode where maybe he meets up with Grief Karga and Cara Dune and do stuff, blah blah blah. Maybe a little side mission episode, and then at some point Din's like, "Oh, I can't do this anymore, bro. I can't. Me and Grogu, we got too much going on. We cannot do this. We gotta have something. We gotta have some kind of defense." And then he calls up a friend. He calls in a favor. He calls up freaking Boba Fett, and he's like, "Yo, I look. You're a crime leader now, but you control most. Obviously, you got a small army under you. Can you help a Mando out?" And he's like, "Sure, man. I owe you for saving my town." And and then Boba Fett gets involved, and then at some point in the fight, Boba Fett could be like, "I could control the Mandalorians. I might want this Darksaber myself." And now you've got a 5-way battle for the Darksaber. And Din Djarin finally gets the living waters. Against all odds, he gets to the living waters. And what do you know? He finds the Mythosaur. And then he comes out of Mandalore, and he's riding the Mythosaur. And then the Mythosaur blasts everything out of the sky. It blasts freaking Moff Gideon, Bo-Katan, Boba Fett, Paz Rizzla, and then all of them, they survive. Well, except maybe Moff Gideon, he can die. But they all crash land and everything, and they look up from the Mandalorian soil, and they see freaking Din Djarin riding the mythosaur. Does that not sound more exciting than what we're getting right now? I mean, it just... I know Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau are breaking their backs trying to carry this franchise into the sequels and make it make sense. But it's not worth it, man. It's not worth it. The sequels are garbage. They don't make sense. You can't make a story make sense, and even if you do, guess what? It means nothing. If Din Djarin unites the Mandalorians and retakes Mandalore and brings unification to the Mandalorians once again, in like 10 years the First Order comes and wipes them out again. What is the point? What is the point of following the New Republic just to see it get destroyed? There is no point. What's the point of showing Luke building a new Jedi people, group? There's no point. They're just gonna get destroyed. We know this. We know why and how this happened already. What little information the sequels gave that made a bit of sense told us everything and how it happened. Minus Snoke. It kind of vaguely implied the cloning, and then the Mandalorian came in season 2 and said, yeah, we're doing cloning. And it's just... when you watch this show, and the goal of it, and then the sequels exist, there's no point to it. There's no point to this at all. And that's a problem. That is a major problem that this show has, and it cannot overcome it. It cannot overcome it. Another problem. The 2-year time skip makes zero sense. I talked to this with my buddy Sixus for like a good hour, and we just kept laughing harder and harder the more we thought about this. So supposedly there's a 2-year time skip between season 2 and the Book of Boba Fett episodes where Mando and Grogu, reunite. Supposedly there's 2 years time skip. Let me tell you exactly why that doesn't make sense. There's a few ways. One, in the Book of Boba Fett, you mean to tell me that between the end of season 2 of Mandalorian, where it shows Boba Fett taking over, Jabba's palace, that he waits 2 years before he starts building his little mini empire? That doesn't make sense, does it? All right, moving on. You mean to tell me it took Din Djarin 2 years to find the armorer and Paz Rizzla on this other planet? It took him 2 years to find them? Okay. That doesn't make any sense. In episode 1, he's talking with Greef Karga about Moff Gideon, saying he never made it to trial. But this happened 2 years ago. He also mentions that Cara Dune was promoted into the New Republic, and now Greef Karga has been looking for a marshal for 2 years? Bo-Katan has been sitting around doing nothing for 2 years? Grogu trained with Luke for 2 years? What do you mean 2 years? It doesn't make any sense. The more you think about it, the more plot holes open up that just do not make any sense. I, for one, am totally fine with the 2-month time gap. If there's a 2-month time gap, that makes perfect sense. 2 months is enough time for Dr. Pershing and whatever the freak her name is to be reinstated into the New Republic, and rehabilitated rather into the New Republic. For Greef Karga and his people to grow Navarro in 2 months is a bit of a stretch, but you know what? It works. I can believe it. I can believe that. Bo-Katan's people to abandon her? Yeah, I can believe that in 2 months. The Mandalorian tribe, clan growing to a much larger number in 2 months. I can also believe that. It's a bit of a stretch, but I can believe it. Mando looking for the clan for 2 months. I can believe that. And Moff Gideon escaping in 2 months. Yeah, totally. All of that makes sense in 2 months. In 2 years? Hell no. That does not make any sense. So, just going back to what I was saying, there could have really been something interesting here with a 5-way or 4 or 5-way grab for the Darksaber. It would have been something unlike anything Star Wars has ever seen. I have not seen anything in Star Wars where you've had so many different factions going for the same thing. They could have done like a Puss in Boots, The Last Wish type of thing, where there's different factions racing to get this last wish. And that movie did great. It wasn't because of that necessarily, but that was one of the reasons it did great, because it was exciting and it was just very entertaining. It was awesome. And I think this really could have done a similar thing. I think we could have seen a very, very similar thing with The Mandalorian here. And I think it would have been so interesting. Now, what we have right now, I think is fine. I think it's good. Like, I'm still enjoying it. I'm not, like, hating this at all. I didn't like Kenobi. There's a few things I did like about Kenobi. Like, I do think Reva had some potential to be a good character, but unfortunately, the direction they took with her just wasn't that great for the most part. It wasn't until the end of her character that I really started to like her and see some good potential in her. Boba Fett was pretty mid, pretty bad actually, I would say. I wouldn't even say mid, it was just bad. And then, you know, The Mandalorian season 1 and 2 were fantastic. I would say nearly perfect. And then this season is just good. You know, it's just good. It's not great. It's not bad. It's good. It's mid. It's very mid. And I think it could have been so much better. I think it could have been so much more exciting. And that was just my idea. And if someone else had that idea before, I don't know it. That's just what I've always thought to me. Like, I've always pictured that. Like, wouldn't that be so cool if they did that? And unfortunately, it seems like they're not doing it. Paz Rizzla is really not as good of a character as I was hoping he was going to be. Well, he's okay, but I think it would have been much more interesting if he stayed an antagonist instead of becoming a bro. But yeah, I'm not really satisfied with Mandalorian season 3 so far. I think it's okay. It's just not what I want. Now, my last thing I'll say, what could have avoided the story derailment? Because, okay, ultimately, think about the Book of Boba Fett, where you had the 2 episodes with Mando, Luke, and Grogu, and then you had, you know, this episode with Dr. Pershing in The Mandalorian season 3. Dave Filoni writes anthologies, right? He writes stories like the Clone Wars. He writes stories like the Bad Batch, where it's a new separated adventure every episode, stuff like that, where the stories can change protagonist. This is what he does. Why didn't you just make this a new anthology, like Dawn of the New Republic? That way you wouldn't have to focus on just The Mandalorian. I think if the Book of Boba Fett, The Mandalorian, and the upcoming Ahsoka show, if you put all 3 of those under one name, like Dawn of the New Republic or something, I don't think anyone would have complained about the protagonist switching in some of these episodes. I think if it was just one big anthology that covered this same time period, I think it would have just made so much more sense. But that's just my thoughts. So if you want to see some of my writing in action, check out my webtoon comic Demonico, Tapper's novel Symbiotic Book 2 coming soon, and the pilot for Yishu Mystic Inc. You can check that out on Global Comics. So thanks very much for watching. If you want more of my content, leave a like, subscribe, hit the bell, and stay tuned for more videos upcoming. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, peace out.